Just cleaning my boots today, and I thought I'd sit down and talk for a minute. Been working hard all day on the farm. Put in a good long day. Got a lot done. Painted my hammer handle. Just cleaning my boots up now. Do this every couple of months. Give them a good clean down, and they're old and beat up, but I like to keep them at least looking somewhat decent. I think people these days, they treat things as disposable. Everything is disposable. Now, my last video, which I don't think anybody actually watched, I haven't even looked at it yet. So I'm not really worried about people watching it. It's just kind of something, give me a reason to voice some thoughts out loud. But I think one of our problems with society is people just treat everything, like it's disposable, and they don't take care of it. Vehicles, tools, and boots, shoes, you name it. People just treat everything like it's just garbage, not even worth their time to think about. And I'll tell you what, you buy yourself a nice pair of work boots, not cheap stuff. Cheap stuff is disposable. But you get yourself a nice pair of work boots and you take care of them. These boots are almost 3 years old. The only thing really wrong with them is the leather is starting to crack. But it's not terrible. They're still waterproof. And they still get me through the day. Put a couple of pairs of laces on them. But other than that, they've been good. These are Red Wings, Lager Max. I don't think I'm going to get another pair of Red Wings. I want to try something different. I think I'm going to get a pair of Thorogoods. Let me tell you guys something. I've saved myself so much money in the long run by saving up and buying quality rather than buying trash. I mean, when it comes to everything, and even if it doesn't really save you money, if it's not something that's going to save you money in the long run, if it just makes you happier to use it, and you therefore use it more often because it makes you happier. Like, for instance, I'll show you this. This is my stiletto framing hammer. Did I need a stiletto? No. A Vaughn, California framer will do the same job. But I do have tendonitis, and the light weight of the stiletto allows me to drive nails just as fast as I could with the Vaughn without killing my elbows, which is nice. And Vaughn doesn't make one the way I like it without a waffle face. But I enjoy using it. It makes my day that much more enjoyable whenever I get to use that hammer. I know that's ridiculous. It's probably stupid. But I just like it. I like the way it looks. I like the way it feels in my hand. If you like using something, you're more likely to actually use it. So if you're wanting to get into something, and I'm not saying, going back to my last video, don't go out and buy something you can't afford just because you like it better than what you can afford. That's foolish. But if it's something that you need to do, and you can make that thing that you need or have to do that much more enjoyable by just having decent things to do it with. Like work. I have to work. I have to have a hammer. I have to drive staples into wood all day. I have to drive nails. I have to beat blocks in. I have to do all kinds of stuff that I have to use a hammer for. Well, having a hammer that I like just makes my day that much more enjoyable. Every time I get to swing that hammer, I get to think, man, I just like this just feels right in my hand. Anything you can do for yourself just to make your everyday a little bit more enjoyable is worth doing. But it also forces you to prioritize things. It makes you prioritize what's really important to you, because you can't go out and buy the nicest of everything imaginable. You can't have the nicest everything. You just can't. You can't afford it. Especially if you're like me and you only pay cash for everything you buy. If I can't afford it, or if I can't pay cash for it, I can't afford it. It's my philosophy. It's done me well. The only thing I think I'm ever not going to apply that to is maybe someday a mortgage. But anyway, just prioritize things. Like I was talking about yesterday, don't go out and buy stuff you don't really even want just because you can. Just because you think you've got some extra money. Go out and buy something that matters to you, that'll actually get you somewhere. You know, don't just buy something just to buy it. Got it pretty well cleaned up. I'm going to hit it here with some saddle soap. This is Hydrating. Hydrating, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm assuming it's pronounced kind of funky. Apply it pretty liberally. I have a pretty thorough 3-step process when it comes to, or 4-step process when it comes to cleaning my boots. I guess 5 actually, now that I really sat down and thought about it. This pretty much applies to any smooth out leather. I wouldn't use it on suede or rough out, but any heavy grade smooth out leather this will apply to. First thing you do is just clean it up really good with a, I don't bother rinsing off with water unless they're just coated with mud. If they're coated up with mud, scrub them down with soap, or not soap, but with just cold water, and scrub them good to get all the mud out. And then let them dry naturally, let them air dry, and then come back later and dry brush and get all the dirt and dust out of the leather. And go back over all your stitching with a what do you call it? With a toothbrush or some kind of fine detailing brush to get all the dirt out of the stitching. If you really want to be particular about it, you can go back through your stitching and burn off with a lighter any loose threads. I know a lot of guys do that. I don't usually bother with it, but you know. Anyway, so back to what I was talking about. One thing that I did when I turned 18 was I knew I wanted to get into doing trade work. I didn't know what trade I wanted to be in, but I knew I wanted to be working in the construction industry. I've always found building things to be satisfying and fascinating. So I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, I need a good pair of boots. So I started saving up some money, and I decided I wanted a pair of Nick's boots. And if you know anything about Nick's boots, they're basically as high quality as boots come. They're pretty incredible. But Nick's are very expensive. And my parents talked me out of it, and I got these Red Wings. And you know what? If you're in the market to buy a pair of Nick's boots, I've never owned a pair, so I can't tell you if they're worth it or not. But I'll tell you this. If you've never owned a pair of boots that you have to take care of, that cost so much money you have to take care of them, you can't just thrash them, go out and get you a good pair of Thorogoods or Red Wings that are kind of that mid-tier boot. They're not a trash boot, but they're not a custom boot either. They're not Nick's or White's or Thursday or anything like that. They're a good mid-tier. Not a starter boot by any means, but they can be. I think these cost $220 when I bought them or something like that. $250 maybe. But I've had these boots for almost 3 years, and I expect to have them at least till October of this year. I'll probably buy something before then and start wearing them just because I like them. I like the look of a good logger boot before then, and then eventually transition them into work boots. But buy yourself a good mid-tier boot first and see if you can actually take care of a pair of boots. Because Nick's and White's boots, stuff like that, they are going to last longer than these. But that only matters if you actually take care of them and condition the leather. If you can't keep up with maintaining them, don't buy them. And buy a pair of cheaper boots that are also the kind that you really do need to maintain the leather to keep them going longer. First, and prove to yourself that you can actually be responsible enough to actually do it. Because it is a little time consuming. I take about an hour or so every couple of months and put into it. That goes back to my point about disposability. You spend $100 more and get a halfway decent pair of boots instead of the cheapest thing on Walmart's shelf. Okay, if I had kept buying cheap boots like I used to wear when I worked in restaurants, I wore black leather boots when I worked at Chick-fil-A for a long time. And I'd go through a pair every 6 months. Well, not even that. Every 3 or 4 months. And they just did not hold up like I wanted them to. But my Chick-fil-A required I bought my boots from their supplier, and they actually would provide me 2 pairs a year. So, and generally I would I'd make it through the 2 that they wore or provided to me, and I would pay for one out of pocket. And they weren't expensive. They were like $80. So they weren't too bad. But, you know, I just run through them. And Chick-fil-A was not as hard on my boots as what I do now is. And I always wanted to get a really quality pair of boots, but I didn't know I could actually take care of them. But if I was still wearing those boots with the kind of work I'm doing now, I'd be buying a pair of boots every couple of months, maybe every 2-3 months. Probably about as often as I need a haircut. But you spend a little more. Spend $250. Okay, if I had bought a $100 pair of boots when I bought these boots instead of a $250 pair of boots or whatever it was I paid for these, I would not still have them. They'd be junk. In fact, these ones are close to getting there themselves, even though they're talking about how quality they are. I've actually worn through the insert on the inside on the heel. It's completely worn through. That's alright, it's still comfortable enough. But you spend a little more and you spend some time taking care of it. And it'll last you much longer. It's really worth it to me. But like I said, you can't do that with everything in your life. So what do you prioritize? How do you figure out what to spend more money on and what not to spend more money on? Well, one, you have to figure out what's actually worth spending more money on. Now, for me, things that are worth spending more money on, I have 3 things that above all else I'm willing to spend more money on than buying the cheapest option. And those things are my shoes, my clothes, my work clothes in particular. My regular going out clothes, I don't. But my work clothes, I do spend a little more. And I start them as regular going out clothes, but then when I get a stain on them or something, I turn them into work clothes. That is my work clothes, my going out clothes, and my tools. For me, it's those 3 things that are worth spending a little extra on and then cutting back in other areas. There's a lot of things that you can skimp on and get away with. Like for me, one of those things is food. I just don't spend as much on food as a lot of other people do. I cook a lot at home, which cuts down on my food costs a lot. And people need to stop convincing themselves just because prices are going up in the grocery stores that it's more expensive to eat at home, because it's not. It's still much, much more affordable to cook at home. And people say, oh, well, it's so expensive to eat healthy, I might as well just not even try. Listen, let me tell you what I do. I eat super healthy. I go to the store, I buy frozen vegetables, I buy chicken broth, I get some frozen chicken, and I go and I buy that big 10-pound tube of ground beef. Okay, I spend about $100 at the grocery store. Okay, get you a good Instapot. You don't have to get a great one. I've got a great value one I've had for 2 years, and it's great. You make you a big beef stew or a chicken stew with vegetables and stuff and eat on it all week. That's healthy. Some chicken, maybe a little bit of rice, but cook it on the side so it doesn't absorb all the stew. Some mixed veggies, some chicken or some beef and the broth. Ooh, talk about good. Something I love to do. And hey, it saves a lot of money. I mean, you're talking about some, individual ingredients costing more, but that 10-pound tube of beef, man, that stuff will go a long ways. I say, oh, well, it's got grease in it. It's grease. You just drain the grease into the trash can if you're really that worried about it. But also, grease isn't necessarily all bad. There are healthy fats and there are unhealthy fats, and beef fat is a healthy fat. So, I rather like it. I like the grease in it. I don't like an excess amount of grease. I'll drain some off, but I do put some in. I make sure I stir it up good whenever I cook my beef. A lot of times I just eat ground beef by itself. Put a little ketchup on it, or a little mustard, maybe a little ranch or barbecue sauce, throw some cheese in it. Man, it's good. But there's a lot of things that you can skimp on that people waste money on. The biggest thing is eating fast food. Fast food is not cheap. The only way that you can eat fast food cheaply, and it's still not as affordable as eating out or eating at home per meal, is to is get like the 2 for $3 cheeseburgers at McDonald's, which is a favorite of mine. Or get like a 4 for $4 at Wendy's, something like that, where you can get a decent filling meal for a more than reasonable price. Eating out is one of the areas where most people waste the most money, and you don't have to. Eating out is such a waste of money. I try not to eat out very much at all. Now, I did splurge yesterday. I went and had I've been doing really well lately about not wasting money on eating out. And so I was like, you know what, well, I'll reward myself. I'll eat out. I went to Chick-fil-A, and I had a rather expensive meal. I think I spent $15 or $16. I had a chicken sandwich, some nuggets, and mac and cheese, and a Coke. I think it was like $16. It was way too much money. All right, so after you do your saddle soap, just brush it off. Go back over, brush everything, make sure it gets worked into the leather real good. And you can wipe it off. You don't have to. Usually I would, but I don't feel like doing it right now, and I don't have any more shop towels. You take your mink oil. This is where it gets kind of gross. Just take some, a dollop like that, and you rub it in with your hands. This you do have to wipe off. I'll use regular paper towels for that. Which I forgot, I actually did just buy some paper towels. So we're good. You rub this in. You want to get it good, and you want it to look like you rub some kind of like you don't want it to look pasty. You want it to look or pasty or waxy. You want it to look like an oil. This mink oil paste is waterproof and hydrates your leather. You keep your leather good and hydrated. You keep your boots healthy. And remember, just like wood, I talk about. I don't know if I talked about it on this YouTube channel, but if you want to keep a wood-handled tool lasting for a long time, treat it with linseed oil or some kind of wood oil. Linseed oil is my favorite. Other people would swear by other things, but I think you'll find that the vast majority of people, especially in America, would say that linseed oil is the way to go. Linseed oil is great. It keeps the wood hydrated. Wood is a living organism. You want to keep it from dying, aka you want to keep it from cracking and breaking. You got to keep it living, so you got to keep it hydrated. Same thing with leather. You want to keep your leather in good shape, you got to keep it hydrated, or it's going to crack. You got to keep it in as close to the state it would be as a living organism whenever it's in your object to keep it lasting. That's generally what I've found to be true of anything that's made from something living. Even plastic, sometimes some plastic products, if you use some kind of petroleum-based oil, you can rejuvenate finishes on stuff like that. I forgot what I was talking about before that. Oh well. Just make sure you work it in there really good. You don't want to use this use a brush on this, because you can wash it off your hands fairly easy. But this stuff, if you get it on your brushes, it's not going to come out. It's just not. This is good stuff though. But it'll dry. You want to get it worked in pretty good and wiped off pretty good after you've let it set for a couple of 10 minutes or so. So once it dries, it's kind of hard to wipe off. So you don't want to let it be too thick in any spot in particular. And if it is a little thick, it'll be fine. It'll eventually even out. But yeah, this is good stuff. This mink oil. Let me go grab some paper towels here in a second. But yeah, take care of stuff. Don't just trash everything you own. And if you have to buy something a little nicer, just so you'll make yourself take care of it, all the better. And then maybe someday, if you've proved to yourself that you can take care of stuff, buy something really nice, like a pair of Nicks or White's boots. If you can afford it, don't go into debt for stuff like that. That's foolish. That's stupid. But if you have the money to put for it and you make enough money, it's not going to take away from. It's going to be within your budget and not take away from your needs, by all means. Because if you're able to take care of them, they will outlast. It doesn't matter how well you take care of a pair of Walmart boots. If you wear them every day, working in the trades, they're going to be thrashed in a couple of months. A pair of Red Wings, yeah, you can keep these things going for a while. A pair of Nicks or Whites or Thorogoods, or not Thorogoods kind of sit in the same category as Red Wings, but Nicks or Whites or Thursdays or stuff like that. Take good care of them. You can have those boots for a long time. See how it's nice and greasy looking? That's what you want. Now I'm going to let this sit for a little while, and I'm going to go grab some paper towels. I'll be right back. I've returned. But yeah, don't waste your money on all this disposable stuff. Don't waste your money on eating out. Eating out is so expensive. Spend a little bit more and get yourself something that will last. Because if you take care of something that'll last, it will save you money in the long run in the most of the time. It's like, I had a job one time. Probably the worst job in the construction industry I've had. I had one coworker there I really liked, which is why I stayed as long as I did. Wasn't a great job though. Did not pay very well, and the boss was, me and him did not get along. Let's put it that way. He was a decent enough fellow, but we just butted heads. Personality clash. I tried my best, but he really pushed my buttons. So I eventually quit, and I'm at the job I'm at now. But he would buy Ryobi tools. And listen, I'm not going to be hating on Ryobi. Ryobi makes a great tool when it comes to their low-end stuff. I think when you're talking about the barrier to entry, Ryobi makes the best tool in their price category. I mean, Milwaukee's and DeWalt's lower end beginner level tools are not as good as Ryobi's beginner level tools, or Rigid's beginner level tools, or Ryobi owns beginner level tools. They're better than everything else in that beginner level price range. But their professional quality stuff, their brushless line, is nowhere near as good as what Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, Bosch, Flex, even Rigid. And I'm not a big fan of Rigid cordless tools. I like their corded stuff, but I'm not a big fan of their cordless tools. I've just never been real impressed. But their brushless stuff is absolutely, it just does not hold up to trade work. In fact, the job I had before, even the one I'm talking about now, we had to go out and buy we had a mix of Rigid and Ryobi. The guy I worked for really liked Rigid. I'm not really sure why. I think it was because of the warranty that people really like Rigid, because I've never used a Rigid tool that blew me away performance-wise, but they're all okay, but they're not going to blow your socks off. But anyway, we had to go out and buy another new Rigid one because our Ryobi impacts, which were the nicer brushless ones, could not drive the lag bolts that we needed them to drive. Whereas the Rigid, which cost the same, could do it no sweat. So the Ryobis, they just don't. They're not a contractor grade tool, in my opinion. Now I know a lot of guys who do it, and if you don't do super heavy duty work, yeah, sure, they can work out great for you. But if you're doing super heavy work like building decks or timber retaining walls, which is what I was doing when I had the one that failed on me a lot, they're just not going to get it done a lot of times. At least in my experience, and they certainly they might get it done for a time, but they certainly don't hold up. That's been also my experience, is that they don't hold up, and especially their nail guns jam constantly. I've used all of their nail guns except for the framing nailer, and all of them are tremendously horrible. I would much rather carry a cord around than do that, but compared to DeWalt, Milwaukee, and pass load cordless nailers, they absolutely do not hold a candle, and they're not worth the money that you would spend to have them. You'd be better served by taking that same amount of money and going to buy a middle-of-the-road compressor and framing nailer, pneumatic nailer. You'd be way better served for probably right about the same price. But anyway, sometimes they're just not going to get the job done. So if you're a homeowner and you don't think you're going to be using your tools very often, maybe you get them out once or twice a year to fix something around the house, go buy Ryobi. Don't waste your money on expensive Milwaukee fuel tools. But if you're like me, and you do a lot of heavy duty work that you need that for, by all means, save up some money. Don't go into debt for it. Don't buy stuff you can't afford, but buy the best tool that you can afford to buy. I mean, all my battery tools are Milwaukee. I got one DeWalt drill. I just don't really care for it. It was a gift, though. I used it for a while until I decided to switch over to the Milwaukee tools. But you just can't do better than Milwaukee or DeWalt, to be honest. They're my two favorites. I like them both. I prefer Milwaukee a little bit, which is why I went with them. And at the time when I started buying into tools, Milwaukee was leagues ahead of DeWalt. Now they're a little closer. Yeah, and then after you're done with your mink oil, you get it all wiped off, just go back with your toothbrush and rub through all your cracks and all your seams and stuff and kind of get that pasty look away. You don't have to do that part, but I like to. I think it just makes it have that little extra touch. And look how much better those look. Ready for another week of work. I'm going to go to the store here in a little bit, and I'm going to get some baking soda, get the stank out of them. It'll be good for another month or so. But yeah, that's my message for today. Don't waste your money on disposable garbage, on things that are expensive, and for not much more money, you can get something really good. And that was my point with the Ryobi. Their brushless line, yeah, they're a lot better than their brushless, cheaper stuff. But for just a little bit more, you could upgrade to Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, something like that. That's a really good tool for not that much more money and get a way better tool. So that is my thing for today. It's probably pretty boring. I don't expect anyone to actually watch a 26-minute video of me cleaning my boots and talking about wasting money. But here it is. So thanks, guys. Maybe I'll make something tomorrow. I don't know. But yeah, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.